definitely creating content that helps people is really the solution.
What really works is building a community, consistently doing events like webinars, and producing content specifically for certain categories.
You earn that raise and you earn that job.
Welcome to Future Fuzz, the digital marketing podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to Future Fuzz, the digital marketing podcast with a B2B slant. Today we're joined by Patrick Thorp, a seasoned revenue strategist with a track record of scaling B2B businesses across the board. Patrick operates as a fractional chief revenue officer for established companies looking to accelerate their growth, and he also runs the Founder Revenue Academy, where he coaches early stage founders on building self-sustaining sales engines. With over 100 businesses and countless pounds in closed deals under his belt, Patrick has perfected a formula for taking companies beyond founder-led sales and enabling them to scale predictably and effectively. We're excited to dive into his unique approach and insights. Patrick, happy Friday. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Very good. Thanks, Justin. Thanks for having me. Yeah, good to speak to you.
Yeah, no worries at all. Delighted to have you on. You're a seasoned, experienced chief revenue officer. Do you also operate as a sort of a chief CRO? I mean, how would you position yourself, Patrick?
Well, I think that the moniker of the CRO is now a lot more accepted in general parlance. I mean, when I started in 2016, CRO was Chief Risk Officer, and calling yourself fractional was just a fancy way of saying consultant. I think that's still true to a certain extent, but the reason I adopted that moniker, and it was the most accurate one of CRO, is because when I go into businesses, often the issue that plagues a lot of them is how can you stitch together marketing, sales, and customer success or account management, whatever you want to call it, and being the leader of that, or sort of the conductor of the orchestra.
Right.
That's kind of really the position that I have to take initially. Then it sort of manifests and goes through lots of different twists and turns the longer I'm with a business and things like that. But yeah, I suppose the positioning is fractional CRO, working with businesses, usually seed, Series A, Series B, that kind of level, wanting to move from founder-led sales to sales team-led sales. That's fundamentally it.
Fantastic. And I mean, you've got some unique approaches, right? You've got tried and tested methods that you've used over the years. So what would you say have been the most effective approaches that you've taken and put into place?
One of the biggest things that I really focus on is the outbound side of things. Now, as a sort of background, I've always been a sales guy, front office, that kind of thing, in financial services and tech. So my natural tendency is going to be more towards the kind of sales stuff. But it's really been on outbound, and it's about how can you structure a motion that enables your reps or you as an individual to reach people who are currently strangers and convert them into customers and actually further on to evangelists as quickly as possible. The way that I found the fastest channel is the telephone. I'm always waiting to be convinced that there are better channels than that, but I haven't seen any empirical evidence for it. And so one of the approaches, I mean, you're being very charitable to use words like unique and seasoned and all these kind of things. The unit of measure for me, for any kind of go-to-market motion, has got to be a conversation. And so I think that where businesses use that as the unit of value and unit of effectiveness, then they change their mindset from we just need to get meetings on the board and all that kind of thing to no, we need to be able to organize our market so we get to understand who's in market right now, who's not quite in market but might be in a few quarters time, but also most importantly who's never going to be in market, so not to waste our time. So it's not a novel approach. I'm not reinventing the wheel, and I suppose I'm being slightly self-deprecating here, but using conversations as a unit of measure and unit of an effectiveness for outbound sales specifically, that's been an approach where I've tried to incorporate that into lots of different businesses, and that seems to be very effective.
I don't think there are many companies out there that are using a conversation as a key metric, but it makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you have that conversation, you get more information. And what I was always taught is that in a sales process, information is king. The more you have, right, the more you can make a judgment if they're in market, or like you say, they're in market, or they're not, or it's not the right person, or what have you. If you don't have that information, you're really going to struggle, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, putting this simply, you could have the same, or if not more, information from a 5 or 10 minute phone call than you could on 6 different emails that might take 3 weeks backwards and forwards to get hold of. And you think you could cut down and improve your efficiency as a salesperson from 3 weeks to 10 minutes. And you think in any other world, that would be a no-brainer for you to do. Whereas what I don't understand is that where the phone isn't utilized and you use LinkedIn or other kind of socials or email or something like that, the speed of execution and the ability to then iterate, the phone is the fastest way to sort of do that.
I mean, I come from that background of, I went traveling around the world after uni, and then had a huge credit card bill, which I needed to clear.
Right.
And I went into the world of work, right, for a proper job. And, and I'd always done sales previous to that. So I'd worked for a recruitment company while I was at uni in their graduate team, to help them recruit graduates. I thought that was great fun. I loved hitting the phones. I thought it was good to meet people and talk to people. And then I got into London. Probably we're a similar age and probably done similar jobs in the beginning, but I had to do 100 calls a day. And I had to book 20 qualified meetings a month. And then I would fly to Germany once a month and do my 20 meetings in like 3 days. It was chaos, but it was a lot of fun. Then the world started to change, and then people started hiding behind emails and hiding behind LinkedIn or what have you. And then COVID disrupted it even more. We became more distant from each other. Do you think that world is coming back? Do you think it, or do you think it never went away? That world where you have to, get on the dog and bone?
I don't think it ever went away for people who had that upbringing because they'd seen how it works. I think where the proliferation of email and social sort of came up in the last kind of decade or so, people that were entering work then got exposure to that very, very quickly. And it did used to work for a time. I mean, I remember when I was, when I first started fractional stuff, 2016, this was where LinkedIn automation, for example, it actually worked. And I was using, combos of bits of tooling like Meet Alfred or Duck Soup or, things like that. And you could set up these sequences and you were still getting the kind of responses and things like that. For those people that had earned their stripes, hitting the 100 calls, 10 conversations, 1 meeting, daily KPI type stuff, I don't think that ever really went away. It went a bit underground, and it's now manifesting itself back again because everything's cyclical. So it's funny how how it all sort of comes back round and repeats itself.
Yeah, indeed. And also with the VC money drying up and the markets being more challenging, there seems to be less marketing budget potentially. Seems to be more of a push and relationship building type of market than a pushing a marketing message market. Would you agree with that? Would you challenge that?
I would consider your voice as a marketing channel. So therefore marketing is still absolutely there, but it's not in terms of we've got this copy, we've got nice images, we've got all this kind of thing. You're using your voice as a marketing engine effectively. So it's just packaged slightly differently. Let's say you have 8 to 12 conversations or sort of 10 or just give round number a day, that very quick. And if you have 4 sales reps doing that, that's 40 conversations a day and then 200 a week. If you've had 200 conversations in a week with your market, you can very quickly understand, is your message resonating or not? And then you can iterate. If anyone can offer me a channel that gives you that amount of feedback and that amount of time to be able to then iterate, then very happy to be convinced and learn about it. I haven't been introduced to it yet.
Excellent.
Future Fuzz is sponsored by SalesSource, B2B pipeline management and sales growth for your business.
I'm just curious, how do you get hold of people these days when often they're not always in office? They're not always in an office, I should say. They don't always have their phone on their desk. There's, that's quite rare these days, I feel. It depends on what kind of organization they work in. Gatekeepers are challenging, right? Some people work from home 3 days a week. And I guess most people are reachable on mobiles. But how do you get hold of that mobile number? How do you get hold of the best number to contact people?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways. So the world of B2B data is an interesting one. I think B2B data for vendors, they're all great and they're all rubbish at the same time. You'll know sort of the big vendors of that, but there's all what I mean is they've all got blind spots, and that's no, it's not to be disparaging to them. It's just that that's the nature of it. And so if there are businesses that can afford subscriptions to all of them, then that kind of solves the problem. But that can be cost ineffective for smaller businesses, you know. So one of the approaches that I took was, it's a bit of a plug, I suppose. There's a business over in the States called Titan or Titan X, and what they do is they score the data to be able to tell you these people pick up the phone and this is the number that they pick up on. These ones are a combination of phone and email, so you've got to get a signal off one of those channels, and these ones are email only. And so what you can do is you still need the subscription to the data source because you need that straight away. But then what they're able to do is score that data. But equally now they've been able to plug into about 6 or 7 different data providers. Those could enrich your data as well. So what you end up with is you've then got a list of people bucketed into, these can go into call only, these can go into call plus email, and these are just email. And what that does is, from an outbound perspective, that's going to mean that you are prospecting to that particular contact in the way that they like to be prospected.
Right.
And I think that's a big change, not only having scored data, but having using a service that's like a data aggregator, effectively, having subscriptions to all of them. That kind of solves the problem. And I think that's getting to the start line for outbound requires an investment in certain things. But to be honest, a good data source or sources, and that's one of them because they're an aggregator, being able to understand what's the right channel to use at the prospect level, or at the contact level, I should say, but then also having a dialer as well. There's quite a few of those now as a category. So I think those are the 3 bits of kit you really need. You need a CRM, a data source, and a dialer for outbound. If you don't have those, then outbound success is doomed, because it's asking we were talking before we started recording about house development. It's like asking a carpenter to come over and build you a new bookshelf without any tools.
Right. Yeah.
And and he'd have to just rip the MDF apart with his hands, kind of thing. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. Very, very sloppy indeed. But the enrichment thing sounds really interesting. So
yeah.
And then, again, curiosity. So is that mainly US data, or is it also cover US and European data? Because one of the challenges that I've personally seen is that fantastic for the US, right? Which is great, right? Because we should be targeting the US anyway, because I heard yesterday that the US economy is more than double the size of the whole of the European Union economy. So, if you need to do well right now, focus on the US. But what I have noticed is there seems to be a pretty big drop-off between US quality data going down into the UK, which is all right. But then as you go into Europe, forget about it. There seems to be like 20% of what US data is available. Have you got any experiences on that?
So I think that, speaking openly, we do at the moment are doing sort of domestic markets, so UK and Ireland and US. Yes, there's more data to go after the US, but these guys have pretty good global coverage.
Yeah.
And because they're aggregating different vendors, that kind of solves that sort of problem. I mean, I usually work on the assumption or benchmark that about 30% of your market, 25-30%, are usually contactable by phone, typically.
35%.
Yeah, or sort of 25 to 30%, I would say. That's just based on running lots of different campaigns and understanding roughly, which means that 30% of your market, that's your entire market. That gives you a lot of people to go after. Now, other people will focus on, well, what about the 70% that you can't reach by the phone? Then that's obviously other channels that you've got to utilize. But have found there to be good coverage for US, EMEA, and APAC, actually, I'll say. APAC's usually the last one. But sometimes with European stuff, not just the data, but you've just got a whole other set of challenges in terms of cultural stuff, in terms of language. Prospecting, for example, into France as a Brit speaking English is very, very difficult. Also with Italy. Germany, you can't do it because of different rules. and all that kind of stuff. So there are other complications, but I haven't noticed that, some US data is absolutely brilliant and then European is different. I mean, I remember a few years ago, there used to be people saying, well, should I buy ZoomInfo or Cognizant, just to sort of pick on the two behemoths in the B2B data world. And people are saying, well, if you want US data, go for ZoomInfo, US business. But if you want Cognizant, they start in London, they've got better EMEA data, so go with them. They seem to have both leveled out the playing field now, it seems.
Right.
For businesses to have subscriptions to both of those is pretty costly, which just makes it out of reach for lots of different businesses.
Indeed, yeah. The investment is pretty substantial, isn't it? I mean, I know that certain pricing levels are pretty high. If you're a massive enterprise, you can probably do it. But of course, if you're a startup or mid-level company, it can be challenging, indeed.
Yeah.
So we cover the channels of calling. Yeah, big fan of calling. Can see its effectiveness there, and then enriching the data sounds really interesting. What about other channels? What about LinkedIn? What are your thoughts on approaching other channels? I know that some people were trying to reach out to people via X, formerly Twitter, and getting some results. Have you got any opinions on that?
I don't have any opinions on sort of X and Twitter and stuff like that. I just don't use it. The businesses that I've been working with, that's never been an appropriate channel. My personal view is that the LinkedIn social selling stuff does work, but honestly, I think LinkedIn is a bit of a cesspit now.
It's a grind, isn't it, as well? I find it a grind, yeah.
Huge. It's been ruined by dormant accounts, fake accounts, bots, all this kind of thing. This whole idea of pitch slapping that I think we're more sort of understanding kind of what that actually means. So the idea of someone, you're accepting a connection request and suddenly you get within 30 seconds an automated message. And so therefore connection rates are down, response rates are definitely down.
Yeah.
So I think it's still a good source for building one's brand and building a company brand and things like that, and releasing your own stuff and organics and letting buyers kind of come to you. But reaching out over LinkedIn is not, I don't think is great. One thing that is better though, the voice note does work on the mobile app. I think that's a better one. Videos, again, I'm not.
Video messaging on LinkedIn. You mean like using platforms like Zoom, etc.?
Yeah, exactly. So you can do videos in line, again, through the mobile app. I mean, you can also connect Vidyard and stuff like that. I think video, I know a couple of people who do video incredibly well, and they do maybe 10 videos a day. Each video is maybe a minute and a half, something like that. But they've gotten the results because they've been grinding it for about a year, 2 years. So yeah, it takes a long time. And I think with people wanting results really, really quickly, they give up on it. I think LinkedIn still does work, but LinkedIn messaging and automated sequences and things like that, I think have just been ruined, honestly.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you around that, actually. So I do like the way that you can connect to people in an automated fashion, but I think the danger is that you're building a network and you shouldn't pitch slap. Making a connection and then researching, have I got good reason to contact this person, and then making a connection. Because one of the challenges with LinkedIn is that you can't mark someone as a spammer. You can block someone, but there are no spam rules, are there? Now, the email is different, because email you can get blocked as a spammer and etc. and don't get through the gate. Whereas I think if you make a connection in good faith, and then there's a level of trust there, and you need to have a decent conversation. I think that there is definitely a balance. I do agree that you're right in the fact that connection rates are down, and people are more wary, I think, on the platform. But actually, the platform's growing. Like, people go on it more and more and more, but it feels to be consumption. So, like you say, it's a great place to build a brand and keep top of mind. Yeah, and there's loads of things to unpick there as well, because I think voice messages are really good too, but they're difficult to scale. But maybe that's a good thing, right? That you can't scale it out. It doesn't even work on the browser on desktop. You have to use your mobile phone, and they're only a minute long, so that's quite good, right?
Yeah, and I think that's why people don't do them, because it's a one-to-one. It's not a one-to-many. I think probably a guy who I know personally, and he's written some great stuff on this, Justin Michael. He's done a lot of stuff. He's got a trilogy of books at the moment, and they're well worth people reading. because they talk a lot about selling through LinkedIn. There's lots of advice in it, but as a sort of tip, what I got was imagine LinkedIn messaging to be more like an SMS or a WhatsApp conversation, as opposed to it being an email.
Okay.
Because so many times you get messages, direct messages going, "Dear Patrick, 3 different paragraphs, kind regards, Justin," that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you think it's just a copy, and you've just taken exactly the same message and just dumped it in a different channel, thinking that's going to work. And that's not how it should be. You should be entering into these. And I'm sort of ripping off Justin's phrase here, so attributing properly. He talks about multiple chat flows. This idea about if you've got, similar to on your phone, you've got sort of WhatsApp messages that you're responding to, similar kind of principle. So it's shifting the mindset about how you utilize that channel more effectively, as opposed to, well, I haven't heard back from email, so I'll just copy and paste my email, put it in LinkedIn, they'll do that. I get so many examples of that, and it's just crap.
Yeah, it's indeed. And for me, if someone approached me on WhatsApp, I'd be well up for it, because I'm busy, right? And I rarely react on emails. Sometimes if the email's really well written and thought through. LinkedIn's fine, right? I'll chit chat to someone a bit. I did engage with someone recently who was trying to promote email software. I'm totally down with the chat there. The guy did a good job. It was more conversational. It wasn't like a copy and paste email.
Yeah.
But in the last 12 months, I've only had 2 companies follow up with me on WhatsApp. And really? I think people could be a little bit more bullish there and say, look, if it's okay, wanted to drop you a quick message. If you're not down with using WhatsApp, totally understand. I won't message you here again. But can we catch up next week? If someone sent me that, I'd be fine with that. I don't know how you feel about that.
I personally don't really like it, but that's because I don't like to receive that. There needs to be some sort of barrier, I think, between a professional and a personal sort of life. And most people have WhatsApp, I would imagine, on their phone, and it's obviously the thing that you're using for friends, family, partners, all that kind of thing. I think too much there has been a blurring of professional and personal, and so when one wants to try and keep some sort of boundary, I think that's important. That's a very, very personal view. As you just said, you're just like, yeah, down with people chatting to me on WhatsApp, no problem at all. Whereas I might find it a little bit invasive.
Yeah, that's a fair answer. I've noticed that when speaking to companies in Latin America and contacts out there, everything's done on WhatsApp. It's completely different. And I was like, wow, you really do everything on WhatsApp. And even in markets like southern, let's say more towards Italy and Spain and Portugal, it's also quite normal. It's really interesting, but I think it's definitely good insight. And then let's talk a little bit more about, going back to automation again. Do you think that is there anything that can be done safely with using marketing automation?
I think webinar invites, that's always a good thought leadership pieces. I think that's definitely something that could be done. Like, I'm sure you've seen, like, there's quite a lot of these AI SDR type things. Quite a lot of businesses, some have come out of Y Combinator. There's some good ones. There's some not so good ones. Again, I think it's something that's relatively straightforward to pitch, because it's the idea about, well, instead of having an SDR team of 6, then you can have one bot effectively doing it for you. Never ever seen kind of sort of decent ROI from it, honestly. And I think there's still quite a long way to go. So I think that is that's making the SDR job harder from that perspective. I think that there is an opportunity, certainly for when it comes to kind of creating content and creating assets for AI to be used, the speed at which it can be done, that's a very good use of it. But I think in terms of trying to use AI for one-to-one prospecting, I think that it's funny how good humans are at detecting stuff that's been written by a bot.
Right.
And it almost like the more human you try to make it sound, the less close you are to hitting that goal.
Indeed.
So it's things like data analysis, using the data analyst on GPT, for example, really, really useful to be able to spot trends in sort of certain spreadsheets and things like that. I think there's also a lot of ways in which you're able to iterate on messaging and all that kind of thing. But it's all the stuff that you do at the back end, but then the front end still needs to be human to human, and that's why I'm a big kind of proponent for phone-based stuff. And I think that there's, as I said, there's lots of dialers that are helping you get into more conversations, whether they're power dialers, parallel dialers, or both. That's a really interesting area, a sort of category of software. So yeah, I think there's definitely some AI for good, but at the moment, I think there's still AI for crap, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of lazy people out there, aren't there? Yeah.
Indeed, yeah.
We do need to get more into that mindset of getting together and getting around a table. I mean, I know that one of the most effective things that we've done recently is just getting people around a table. And it doesn't have to be many, so it can be 6 or 7, but like-minded people in a similar business space to have a conversation. Some people call it a round table. I feel a round table is sometimes a little bit too formal. It feels a little bit too forced, but it essentially is that. And events have come back quite strongly as well, right? Because people do want to connect with other human beings, and they do want to have a decent conversation. But yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of that for sure.
Yeah, I think that just on that round table, sort of people being together in the same room, I'm really happy that things haven't come back to normal in terms of 5 days a week, 8 till 6 or whatever it might be in an office, but definitely for commercial sales teams or the entire go-to-market team to have a hybrid or 3 days in the office, that kind of thing makes a massive difference. It's when it comes to group training, actually being in the same room, hugely by far superior to virtual training, I think. Just sort of desk surfing as well, especially if you're leading a sales team, actually hearing what's going on makes a huge difference. But then also being able to, if you're a VP of sales, to be able to meet with your VP of marketing or VP of CS or things like that and actually have a bit more of a kind of whiteboarding session. I think that that's hugely valuable. And even in like enablement with sales reps, a good test I found is with any product is getting a sales rep to explain to me how it works, but draw on the whiteboard how this works. Show me where data goes, how it comes back, what gates it needs to go through. When you say it's an open API, draw what that means and take me through the entire product and basically whiteboard it for me. And it just increases a sales rep's technical understanding of a product within 30 minutes rather than going, read that deck or read that API documentation, because you just think you're not going to do that because it's dull, honestly.
Yeah.
But drawing pictures and simplifying it, give tech guys a bit of a heart attack. But for lay salespeople, that could be a really effective way of learning the technical side of the product.
Yeah, and typically salespeople and commercial-minded marketeers and quite as social beasts, right? You need that bonding and you need that communication, indeed, where it's possible. Because I know a lot of teams do operate with remote teams, but that's definitely so powerful. I don't know if you've heard. By the time this podcast goes out, I hope this is slightly relevant. But Amazon have told their staff to come in 5 days a week. That feels to me to be a little bit extreme. Let's see if the larger companies get away with doing that. Let's see if talent leaves or what happens. Have you heard of any other shifts like that?
Do you know what? I take the view that if you're private sector, so I won't talk about public sector because I haven't worked public sector before, but if you're private sector and your employer says, I want you in, then you're in. And so again, I've been brought up in that way, and there just seems to be a shift where employers are having to dance around the employees far more than I was used to. And for example, if you said, to your sales team, I want you in at 8 a.m. tomorrow, and someone said, well, what for? The reason is because I told you so. Now that sounds a little bit archaic perhaps, but at the same time, Amazon, they said, well, we want you 5 days a week, and someone says, well, I don't want to do that. Okay, we'll go somewhere else then. Yeah. And again, it's sort of a bit mercenary, but it's the employer's call, and if you don't like it, then you go. I'll probably create opposition there, but I think that's just your boss, your line manager, your CEO tells you to do something, you do it, even if it's a Saturday morning type thing. Unfortunately, that's kind of the view I took.
When stuff needs to get done, it needs to get done, right?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely. I'm not one for a sort of micromanaging. And if everyone can get their work done by 3 p.m. on a Friday or whatever it might be and clock off, great, have at it. But at the same time, if it's just like, we need this to happen and there needs to be 2 hours or 3 hours done on a Saturday morning, for example, that's very, very rare that happens.
Yeah, it's
just
rare.
to be clear on that.
Yeah.
And that's why I think most people would be just like, look, this is a one-off. We've got this big project on. We need to get it done. And so therefore, 9 till 12 Saturday, we'll get it done. And even if we're in the office, then lunch on the company or something like that afterwards, or beers or whatever it might be, to kind of sweeten the deal a little bit. But I think that's starting to come back now in terms of, the employers being a bit more empowered to be able to say, well, I'm the employer, you're the employee, and your private sector, so I would like you to do what I'm asking you to do.
Yeah. It feels like another cycle, doesn't it? I think looking at the market, and also it was pretty crazy, right? Employment figures were really amazing. Lots and lots of people in work. There's been a shift and a little bit of competition going into a job market. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Mm-hmm. And you do want people to be committed. You really do need people to be committed, especially in a commercial sense. It's all about balance at the end of the day, because there's so much flexibility now. There was no flexibility when I was working in London. I was in the office at 7:30 because I had to sell to Germany, because then it was an hour difference, right? Yeah, I didn't complain. I got my Pret coffee. I sat down on my desk and I went for it. Something I do think's for the better now, which they didn't have before in those sort of sales teams, was if I hit my targets and I hit my meetings and I could show like I'm done, right? Let me leave an hour early. That wasn't there, and that would have been nice. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's I think it's great when people hit targets. At the same time, having taken positions of leadership, if someone hits their target, you think, okay, well you've done the job that I've employed you to do.
Yeah.
You haven't done. You've done the minimum, because that's what I need you to do. So you've hit you've hit your target. You've got commission, but what about the stuff that's after that? What about the accelerator, the bonuses, all that kind of thing? Right. The kind of thing that's going to jettison you up into, all these like slightly horrendous sounding things at President's Club and all that stuff that people do.
Lunch club was what we had.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that there is, as you said, there is more flexibility, and the hybrid model does work. Equally, hybrid models, sometimes you can say, well, let's have a meeting at 7:30 because you're going to be at home. You don't need to commute, so we can get on the phone nice and early. Yeah. And so, well, hang on, I need to sort of get up. I don't get up till 8:30 and all this sort of stuff. And again, I think it's been proven though that people do work effectively from home. But the point that not to labour it too much, but just to reiterate, the hybrid model does work 3 days out of the 5. It works better for commercial teams, for go-to-market teams. For technical teams, can't really comment on them because I'm not a tech guy, but they don't need to be in the office in the same way. It's good once a month to bring everybody together so everybody knows kind of what they're doing, what they're driving towards, and how they all fit together. But I'm purely speaking from a go-to-market commercial lens.
Yeah, indeed. I've been to Berlin startups and seen lots of commercial teams in darkened rooms being treated like mushrooms. Indeed. Mm-hmm. Patrick, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast today. I think we covered some really good topics. There's some really good insights. We're definitely going to drop some show notes into this episode too. So there was Justin Michael, and then the data enrichment platform that you suggested. Yeah, that's
Titan X. That's run by Joey Gilkey and Justin Middleton. So it's really worth a look at.
Titan X, great. We'll get them on the podcast as well. Patrick, thank you for coming on the podcast today.
No problem. Thanks now.
Thanks for tuning in and making the choice to listen to this podcast. If you liked what you've heard today, please don't forget to subscribe.